Hey, thanks for checking out this video. In this video series, I'm discussing Trump possibly being the sixth king of Daniel, the pre-runner to the Antichrist. In this video particularly, we're going to talk about the agreement and how possibly this agreement with the UAE fits into this agreement in Daniel 11 that sets up the stage that ultimately the eighth king, the Antichrist, violates and destroys or does away with the person who set up this agreement. And I'm going to jump over to Daniel 8:5, and that is where the angel is giving Daniel this interpretation of this dream. And it talks about the shaggy goat from the west, and it does battle with this ram with two horns. And then I'm going to jump over to 8:8. It says, the male goat then became extremely strong, but when it was strong, the big horn was broken, and in its place rose and appeared to be four horns in the direction of the four winds of heaven. Out of them came a little horn which grew extremely big in the direction of the south and east, in the direction of the land of glory. It grew so great that it reached the armies of heaven. It hurled some of the armies and the stars to the ground and trampled on them. And then that sets the stage for the sixth, seventh, and eighth king. And that eighth king is that Antichrist that tramples the host of heaven. And we see further down that the angel in 14 says that this time period is 2,300 mornings and evenings. And then down in 26, he says, the vision of the evenings and mornings which has been told is true. So that length of time is true. And back in 17, it says, human being, understand that this vision refers to the time of the end. And the 19, and I said, I'm going to explain to you what will happen at the end of the period of fury, because the vision has to do with the time of the end. And people want to say that this is some of these parts of the vision are Alexander the Great, Antiochus Epiphanes, but these were contemporaries of Daniel's time, or like within several hundred years or a couple centuries within Daniel's time. They weren't even close to the time of the end. So we know that this vision of the ram and the goat is for the time of the end, and we're possibly in that time. So now we go to 11, and we'll read this part, and this is where it gets into this agreement. And this agreement with the UAE is to set up other things. It's to get the snowball rolling, to get other nations to sign on to this, and ultimately it's to set the stage so that a third temple can be built, so that these prophecies can become fulfilled. So we'll read, and here's why Trump's a possible candidate for this sixth king that sets all this up. It says in Daniel 11:15, the king of the north will come, set up siege works, and capture a fortified city. So we have to, first of all, we have to determine what this fortified city is, and if it's still a future or if it's already been fulfilled. The forces of the south, which is the Ram, which is Medo-Persia, which is possibly Iran, will be in insufficient defense. Even his elite troops will not be strong enough to resist. The invader will do as he pleases. No one will be able to withstand him. So he will establish himself in the land of glory, which he already has done this. Trump has already done this by putting the embassy in Israel. And he will have the power to destroy it, which we have the military might to do that. And Trump has been he's on that coin, the inaugural coin of like the 70 years celebration. So that qualified, there's one qualifier for Trump being the sixth king. He will determinately advance with the full force of his kingdom. And right now America has the so-called uh, you know greatest military might in the world. And we'll see the difference between this person having the great military might versus the Antichrist, because people are saying that Trump is the Antichrist, but he's the Antichrist starts with a small army and a small following and becomes great. He doesn't start out with the greatest army. He doesn't start out with the greatest economy. He's, which this sixth king is. Okay, and that is Trump. Trump is starting out, he started out with a great economy, he started out with the great military might. So that disqualifies Trump from being the Antichrist. He will determinedly advance with the full force of his kingdom, but he will make an agreement. And so this is the agreement that's possibly this agreement with the UAE, with the king of the south. So somehow they're going to have to get this king of the south that he's fighting with to try to sign on to this. So the UAE is not this king of the south that we're warring against, but it's a precursor to this agreement. And give him a daughter in marriage. His object will be to destroy him, but the agreement will not last or work out. So this agreement, this UAE, this could be the initial thing in the overall agreement, but we know that this agreement won't work or last out based on this. Next, he will put his attention to the coastlands and islands and capture many. And in this geopolitical environment, the coastlands, they're trying to get into that the Horn of Africa, that whole passageway is a very contentious and a politically strategic place to control all that oil going. Then you have in the Pacific, you have that whole Asian theater with the South China Sea and all that kind of stuff. So we can see that there's those scenarios that qualify Trump for being a candidate for this, and he will capture many. But so this is what will happen. But an army commander will put a stop to his outrages. And I don't know if it's an army commander that is an American army commander that stops Trump from doing all these things, or if it's a rival commander that keeps him in check if he is the candidate. After this, he will put his attention to the strongholds of his own land. And see, America is having all this civil unrest. It's having, financial unrest, it's having political unrest, it's having racial unrest, it's having, social unrest, the whole country. And this leader is going to have to turn his attention inward. And so that is a possible setup, and an additional candidate that would qualify Trump to be the sixth king. But he will stumble and fall and not be seen again. So whether that's this election period or the next, if Trump wins, then that presidency, the next 4 years, these will be things to look out for in that presidency. Or in the short term, these things could be fulfilled really quickly. And that would mean, these things would have to happen before this election, and we won't see Trump ever again. And this also is the breaking of that prominent horn, is the stumbling of this leader. The ram has this prominent horn, and then it's broken and cast to the four winds of heaven. And people say that's was Alexander the Great or that Epiphanes guy, but those were not contemporaries of this time period. Those were like 2,300 years ago. So those are disqualified. And it says in his place. So this is a consecutive rising immediately after the fall of this candidate. In his place will arise one who will send a tax collector through the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he will be broken through, though neither in anger nor in battle. And so you'll see this collapse of this nation, and then another leader trying to rise out, but he won't last. He'll try to collect taxes to try to restore that nation, this nation. But he may die of natural causes, or an illness or something. But then it says there will arise in his place. So the seventh king, the tax collector king, rises out of the sixth king's position, and then this eighth king rises out of this seventh king's position. They're consecutive. There's not this time period of centuries that goes by. It says there will arise in his place a despicable man, not entitled to inherit the majesty of the kingdom. That disqualifies Trump. Trump won his presidency. He was given the presidency. He didn't win the popular vote, but so Trump, this disqualifies Trump as being the Antichrist. He could be the pre-runner, but he will come without warning and gain the kingdom by intrigue. You could say that Trump's done that by dishonest things that got him. Clinton won the popular vote, but so I think that's why people think that Trump is. Anyway, large armies will be broken and swept away before him, as well as the prince of the covenant. This is that prince that made this covenant that we saw, the sixth king. So even the sixth king, this eighth king, will wipe out. Large armies will be broken and swept away before him, as well as the prince of the covenant. Alliances will be made with him, but he will be undermined them by deceit. And although he will have but a small following, he will emerge and become strong. This is the opposite of Trump. So the Antichrist will rise out of a broken nation. We're in the time of the nation being broken. We're in the time of possibly the sixth king. Okay, and without warning, he will assail the most powerful men in each province and do things his predecessors never did, either recently nor in distant past. He will reward them with plunder, spoil, and wealth, while devising plots against their strongholds, but only for a time. So this Antichrist only has that 3.5 years, the 42 months. And if you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, I'll go to Revelation 17:9 and 10. And it says, "This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills which the woman is sitting. They are 7 kings. 5 have fallen." Okay, so now it says, "One is living now, which is the 6th, and the other is yet to come." Okay, when he does come, he must remain only a little while. The beast which once was and now is not is the 8th. So there's the 6th, which is, the 7th comes and only lasts a little while, which we read in Daniel 11. You have that man, that willful man, and then he stumbles and falls, which is the 6th king, and then you have the tax collector that only lasts a few days. Here it says he must remain only a little while. That's the 7th king. The beast which once was and now is not is the 8th king. It comes from the 7, which is on its way to destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet begun to reign. Other scholars say that these were previous kingdoms, like part of these other past kingdoms. But here we clearly see that these 10 kingdoms have not yet begun to reign. They haven't even had a kingdom yet, not until, but they receive power as kings for 1 hour with the beast. And then the beast is not released, that the Antichrist is not released until the 5th trumpet, and that event hasn't happened yet. So the point of this is to show the chronology of things and where we are, and this agreement with the UAE is setting the stage for this, ultimately this agreement that we read in Daniel 11:17, this agreement that the 6th king makes with this king of the south. So that is what this, I believe that this UAE agreement is setting the stage for ultimately, and ultimately this will lead to more nations signing on, and it will pressure this king of the south to come into this agreement that will set the stage for this state of Israel to develop their temple, and ultimately set the begin the time cycle, this 2,300 mornings and evenings. All right, leave me a comment, and hope you guys are doing well, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.